I'm Ava Dellaira, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Ava Dellaira.
on the right-hand sidebar of the website at hankgarner.com. You can find links where you can subscribe to the show, and it helps other people find the show. The more people subscribe, the higher we go in the rankings, and the easier people find us. I'd like to thank some sponsors this week for helping us bring the show to you. I, your humble host, have a brand new book out. It's called The Pandora Codex. Oliver Weber, Book 1, A Closely Guarded Secret, A Stolen Artifact, and a Madman Trying to Open a Portal to Hell. Can Oliver Weber become the hero he's meant to be? Pick up the Pandora Codex now. It's the first book in the Oliver Weber series. The second book, Jacob's Ladder, comes out very soon. Go ahead, dig into this series. Grab it now. You won't be disappointed. My friend Patricia Gilliam has a new series called Series Craft 101, and she has a series of books, the Fictional Character Creator Workbook, Setting and World Building Workbook. If you are looking to put together a long-running series like Patricia has done, these are some things that she's learned and that she can help you to get on top of that makes managing a long series much easier. Go check it out. There's a link in the show notes, and we'll be talking about it more. Bokera Brumley has a new book called Imani Earns Her Cape. It's a middle grade novel. You might have heard us talk about it on the show just a week or so ago when Bokera was on. 12-year-old Imani should be celebrating the most important day of her life by eating myrfruit, casting flying spells, and laughing with her mother, but there's just one massive problem. Her mother's been kidnapped by a giant troll, and now Imani is lost in the Fey realm with no way home back to Virginia. Completing her rite of passage alone is inadvisable, but if Imani doesn't want to lose the only family she's ever had, she may have no choice. Transportal, train travel, underwater cities, submarines, sea dragons, and unexpected family all combine in Imani Earns Her Cape. Thanks for listening to the show. At the end, as always, we have an audiobook clip from my friend Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Hey authors, you need an editor in your life. And not just an editor, but an editor that understands you and gets what you're trying to accomplish. That's why you need to visit my good friend Scott Woodley at marlowemoss.net and let him take a look at your work. He'll give you a free sample edit. Scott can help you be the best writer you can be. Visit him at marlowemoss.net. Inspired sentences and polished paragraphs for print-worthy books at competitive rates and always on time. Offering a full range of editorial and ghostwriting services to self-published and traditionally published authors. Turn your ideas into words and see your dreams become books. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Ava Dellaira on the show with me. Ava has a brand new book out called In Search of Us. It's out everywhere right now. So after listening to Ava, I'm sure you're going to want to run out and grab a copy of her new book. Thank you for joining me today, Ava.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, thanks. We begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh, that's a good question. I have a very clear first memory of struggling with words and wanting them to express my feelings, which was in second grade. I remember we were asked to write a poem about the things we liked and why, and mine kind of went on a little plainly at the beginning. I like rainbows because they're pretty, that sort of thing. And then I got to, I like my mom, and I remember feeling like, oh, I can't explain like why I like my mom. It's too big for any kind of words, like what she means to me. And I ended up writing, I like my mom because she gave birth to me, I think. So that was, I guess that's not necessarily wanting to be a writer, but it was definitely like that feeling of wanting words to express some like deep emotion and sort of struggling with how to do that. But I was copying down books, I guess, since kindergarten. That was my like favorite activity when kids would, when we got free time, you know, I would spend it choosing a book from the book section and like literally copying it word for word and making my own version. So I think I've been drawn to books and to writing for a really long time. Although it took me quite a while to realize I could make a career out of it.
Oh, it does for so many people. That you know, that's a similar part of a lot of people's stories is that we know that there's this thing inside of us that wants to tell stories, and then one day you realize, oh, I can also do this and make actual books, and maybe if the fates smile upon us, we can actually make a living doing this. You know, it's the two things don't necessarily always connect, but it's a beautiful thing when it does.
They don't always, but
right. Yeah. So where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was actually born in Los Angeles and grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We moved there when I was about 3 years old.
And where did you go to college?
In Chicago, at the University of Chicago.
Yeah. What led you to Chicago from out west?
I had a high school English teacher who recommended the school to me, who'd gone there. And I trusted this teacher a lot. Albuquerque is amazing. It still feels like home in a way to me. It was a really magical place to grow up, but it's also small enough that it's the sort of place that, like, as a teenager, at least for me, you want to leave. Like, I wanted to sort of get out and see the world. So I definitely wanted to go to, somewhere different for college.
And Chicago probably felt like the most distant place from Albuquerque at the time, didn't it?
Yeah, Chicago or New York were both the sort of, it felt like a totally other world for sure.
What did you study?
I did a sort of, some kind of creative invent your own major. But I studied a combination of English and creative writing and like philosophy, critical theory, and film. So I really got it all in there. And photography, yeah. They were pretty, there's room to be yourself at the University of Chicago for sure.
Well, all of those things, equate to, skills that a storyteller needs. Each one of those things that you mentioned are all, critical things that for someone who is writing and reporting on the human condition as writers do, those are essential tools to looking at the world. Yeah,
I think you're right. Totally. I definitely feel like my experiences in college helped me, but like still, some of what I was thinking about in terms of, studying actually like trauma, the intersections between trauma and popular like mass culture or pop culture, in my sort of college thesis ended up returning in a totally different way when I was writing my first book, Love Letters to the Dead. Yeah.
So after college, you headed back out west, didn't you?
Yes.
What was your desire?
Back and forth. I graduated college And actually, that summer, the summer I graduated college, my mother had died suddenly. So I was very much grieving her, and I moved back to Los Angeles. And that kind of felt like it was too much to be home in Albuquerque where I'd grown up. I needed something different. But because, I was born in LA, because her and my father had spent many of the early years of their romance here and got married here, somehow coming to LA felt like a way of searching for her almost.
Right.
I felt like connected to this part of her that I hadn't quite known. And like, this going down the street of their old apartment building, or to the beaches where I knew she used to go, or to the restaurants where they ate. So it's sort of that first year of being here, after having lost her, that it definitely had a kind of like, the city had a sort of magical quality to it for me. And after that year, I actually left again and went to an MFA program at the University of Iowa, to the Writers' Workshop there. And then when I graduated that, I'd studied poetry.
As one does.
I graduated that. Yeah. Actually, it's like, I'm going to have to try to make a living. Right. And, the options, it's not impossible, but quite limited options in the field of poetry. So I came back to LA thinking I would pursue my interest in film and try screenwriting. And it was from there that I ended up working for a novelist and director, writer-director, Stephen Chbosky, who kind of became a mentor to me. And he was the one who told me, after I gave him my first attempt at the screenplay, he said, I think you should try writing a novel. That was when I wrote my first book. So there's my long-winded journey.
You talked about going back to Los Angeles, and that Albuquerque was a little too raw. Do you feel like going back to LA was kind of like rediscovering a home that was lost? The kind of the vestigial pieces of what made you who you are?
Yeah, definitely. In a way it did. Like, it was both unfamiliar and familiar at the same time.
I love that. How did you come?
And it was a way, yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it was almost like there was some sort of like invisible past under the present city that I could just almost glimpse,
Absolutely. How did you come to be connected with Stephen Chbosky? You said you went to work for him?
Yeah, I was his assistant for years, and I was an associate producer on his movie, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. But I originally had met him through a friend who went to the Iowa Woods. I interviewed. I'd heard he was interviewing assistants, and I met him at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and I showed up like an hour early, which was enough time to promptly spill my latte all over the front of my shirt.
Of course.
And then try to wash it off and dry it under the hand dryer before he arrived. There's definitely still a stain, but he hired me anyway, so that's good.
Oh, that's so funny. So you, but you got the bug to write a screenplay and showed it to him, and that's when he said, maybe you should write a novel. What was your first?
Exactly.
What made you want to write a screenplay to begin with? Had that always appealed to you, or just kind of being in LA kind of seep in there?
Yeah, I've been interested in film for a while, since college. I had taken a lot of film classes, and I was in this sort of film club. I made a couple student films that I desperately hope that nobody ever finds access to. But so I've had that interest for a while, and then I had a really strong, by the time I finished with Iowa, I really did want to write. So screenwriting felt, I don't know, like a way of trying to combine those two interests.
When you showed Stephen that screenplay and he suggested that you write a novel, was he, kind of prompting you that, maybe the novel would be a better vehicle because you could take your time and build the world? What did you take from that advice that he gave you?
Well, I've since learned some about screenwriting, but it was my first attempt
right
back then, and I think I didn't totally understand. I had a lot of prose that I was trying to stuff into the script, and I think he could sense that the form maybe was maybe I had a different way of saying things than I could do in the screenplay at that time. So I think that was part of it. And he also, his path was writing The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And when I met him, he was about to, he had written the screenplay for that movie and was about to direct it. So I think he saw a lot of the value in owning your own work, in the way that you can as a novelist, that you can't exactly in the same way as a screenwriter. So I think that was also part of his thinking. And, at the time I was, young and new and really down to try anything. And that it was that very same night that I thought of the title for my first book and started writing it, and the voice of it came so kind of quickly to me. I think that I needed to write that book and didn't know it. So it definitely felt like the right thing. In that book, which is was my first before In Search of Us, is very much, it's a girl starting high school and grieving her older sister by writing letters to famous dead rock stars and actors and poets. And it's a coming-of-age story and a love story and a lot of things, but it's also very much a story about the process of grieving, which I was still going through with my mother. So I think writing that book it helped me, just in the same way that writing the letters helps Laurel in the book.
Right. Chbosky wrote one of the great modern coming-of-age stories, and Love Letters to the Dead is an amazing coming-of-age story. Why do you think those kinds of stories resonate with readers so deeply? And is there any conscious thing that you do while writing a story like that that helps you to connect better with the character that you're writing, or is it just flowing out of you and being sort of a catharsis for what you're going through?
That's an interesting question. I think for me, the connection tends to come kind of naturally. I mean, with that book for me, Love Letters to the Dead, it was super personal, and Laurel felt very close to my teenage self. But even with my second book, which is less obviously autobiographical, I still felt this really kind of deep emotional connection to both of my protagonists, and I think they probably both expressed aspects of me and of things that I was kind of thinking about and grappling with.
How long did it take you to write that first book, Love Letters to the Dead? You said it flowed out of you and you felt like it was a book that you needed to write. What was the writing process like for getting that out?
Well, I was working full-time still, so I would write after work and sort of stay up way too late. I was living alone in a teeny tiny apartment by the beach then, and I'd stay up till 2 a.m. a lot. But it only took about a year, I think, to write the very first draft. But then it took almost another year to edit, just before I even sent it out trying to find an agent. The first draft was definitely very messy, and I took a lot of time rewriting and getting feedback from friends and sort of doing everything I could on my own before letting it into the world. And then once, I found an agent and we started trying to find editors, and I found an editor and all that, it was another many more rounds of editing. So it was probably 3 years of writing in total.
That first edit that you go through when a book is that kind of raw and close to you personally, and when you're writing it, these are all necessary things, and they feel very real and very powerful. And then when you put the book away for just a little bit and then come back to it and start editing, how difficult are those scenes to trim and to look objectively at what needs to stay, what needs to go, what needs to change, when a story is so personal and close to you?
Oh, it's difficult for sure. I think having outside eyes is really important, even if that's, just a friend that you trust. I think there's always going to be, even for the writers who are the best editors of their own work, I think for almost everyone, maybe not everyone, but almost everyone, there's always going to be some blind spots in your own work. But at the time I was working on editing the book, I was also, we were in the editing room for the film of The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So I was sort of watching and trying to help Steve go through that process. And I definitely learned a lot from the sort of painful decisions about what scenes had to be left out and that kind of thing. So it helped me, I think, to make those sort of difficult decisions in my own book.
I bet that was a very valuable experience, because as an author, when you think that every word is precious, and then you're in the editing room of a film and you see that things get trimmed, but then you can see the product, the final product, and say, you know what, I think this is better for that. I bet that's a good thing to pick up that maybe you just don't get from editing your own words, seeing it in action and seeing how it comes together. I bet that's a real gift.
Yeah, it was completely. It was like a hugely valuable experience to me as a writer. Just seeing, like, you know, for example, if we, you know, this one scene at the beginning of the film might be amazing and beautiful and it would make someone, you know, by the time you get 3/4 into the movie, you find that the audience is getting exhausted and they don't want to cry at the moment you want them to cry then. And so you kind of have to go back and take out that scene that might have been great in and of itself, but doesn't serve the whole of the story in the way that you hoped it would. And, you know, so just like thinking about that kind of emotional balance and rhythm and all of that was a really big lesson for me in editing my own work, for sure, as a writer.
So Ava, tell us about the new book, In Search of Us. How long did you wait after the first book, and who are the characters in this book, and where did this idea come from?
So This was a book that took me a little while after, I think, Love Letters to the Dead to start. I know a lot of people finish their first novel and then they immediately start out on the second. But it took me a moment to find the story that I next really wanted to tell, as it really felt close to me. The first idea, the first spark of the idea came while I was in the car, similarly to with Love Letters to LA traffic is helping me as an author. But I thought about writing a story that goes back and forth in time between a mom and a daughter when they're each 17. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the plot of the book. It begins in the present day with Angie, who's a biracial girl growing up with her single white mom, Marilyn. And Angie has a lot of questions about her dad, but the only thing that her mom's ever really been able to tell her without breaking down is that her father died in a car accident before she was born. But Angie eventually discovers evidence of an uncle who's alive when she finds a music video he made online, and she realizes that her mother's been lying to her, and she thinks perhaps that means her dad could be alive too. So she sets off for Los Angeles on a road trip with her ex-boyfriend in hopes of finding her father and the truth about where she came from. And then meanwhile, we go back in time to Los Angeles in the late 90s when Marilyn is a 17-year-old. She's a failed child actress who's never really been able to live up to her mom's dreams of stardom. They are out of money and forced to move in with her volatile uncle. And Marilyn's going along and auditioning for commercials and sort of just biding her time until she can leave for college and begin a life that belongs to her. When she meets James, the neighbor that lives downstairs, and falls in love with him. And those are Angie's parents. So the past and the present eventually come together when, Marilyn and Angie's stories coincide. But so those are the basics. So I started out, I was inspired in part certainly by my relationship with my mom and by some of that feeling of Los Angeles that I described to you. And I was also inspired by my relationship with my husband. This is the book the first thing I wrote after we moved in together. We were getting engaged and thinking about having a child. I'm now very pregnant, about 38 weeks, with our first daughter. Yeah. So it was, I wasn't pregnant yet at the time I was writing the book, but I was very much thinking about what it would mean to become a mother and, the responsibilities of a mother and what it means at this moment in time to be a white mom to a biracial kid. And so all of that kind of went into it, as well as my feelings about my relationship with my mom and, my sort of experience of being in love and really trying to create a life with another person.
While this book is not autobiographical for you, there are a lot of real life themes and connections, if you will, that seem to have springboarded this story.
Yeah.
As a writer, is that important to you that you find some sort of emotional connection first, that then you can feel some sort of empathy with the characters that you're writing?
I think so, yeah. It was liberating in a way, this book, because the first book wasn't autobiography either. There was certainly a lot that was fictionalized, but there was more that was sort of, this character is based on this friend, and, some more direct autobiographical connections. And it was liberating in this book to feel slightly more like it was slightly more separated from my own life, but yet the emotional connection that I felt to the characters and to the themes in the story became, definitely at least equally deep as in my first book. So I think it is important to me just to connect, to find, a reason for being for the story. And that's not always obvious when you start out. Sometimes you have an idea and some vague ideas of characters. And for me, at least, I just have to write to know who those people are. And sometimes it can take till I'm halfway through to find out, or till I'm done to sort of know why I needed to tell this story at this time. But I think there is always something that can be conscious or even unconscious that's making the book feel urgent.
So the new book is called In Search of Us. It's on sale everywhere right now. Ava, what do you hope people take away from this book?
There's a lot in this book, a lot of different themes. It's a story about identity, it's a love story, it's a family story. But I guess one of the sort of important themes to the in the book to me is this sense that our histories matter, both our personal histories, our family history, and our collective history. And that in order to create the present and the futures that we want for ourselves, we have to come to terms with those histories, and we have to face them, and we have to, know them. And so that was, I think that is probably, if I had to pick one thing that I hope the book says or inspires, I think that would be it.
It's powerful stuff. Ava, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today. If people are not familiar with your work, where can they find you and to follow along with what's going on?
Well, I have a website, which is just my name, avadellaira.com. And there's links on there I'm on Instagram and Twitter, which I'm a little sporadic about, but I always try to at least answer. Sometimes I can't, but I always try to answer any tweets from readers at least, or, personal ones. So, and I'm on Facebook too, and there are links to all of that social media stuff on my website.
We'll put a link to your website in the show notes. Ava, congratulations on the new book. Congratulations on the new addition to your family. That's exciting news, and we're super happy for you. We're going to send everybody to pick up a copy of In Search of Us and Love Letters to the Dead. Ava, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so great to talk to you. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Hedwig slipped into David's den, the circular reading room. A ladder of crude rungs protruded from the wall, remnant of its days as a grain silo. He pulled himself upward, rung by rung, until the bookcases and sofas were far below. Even if he fell and died, he didn't really care anymore. No, he did care. He couldn't die yet. She had to die first. That would make their divorce final, if she wanted it so much. Darkness enveloped him. He reached the top of the ladder and stepped off onto a catwalk of black mesh, lit only by the faint light of the 4 square windows that encircled the turret. From this perch he could see the exit she would use. He felt like an assassin, like Lee Harvey Oswald in the window of the Texas schoolbook depository. But he wouldn't use a rifle. No, rifles leave evidence. Rifles can be produced in court. Rifles can miss. He pulled back a shroud of burlap and opened the cardboard box he'd stashed up here earlier that day. He reached into it and withdrew the only murder weapon, the only magic bullet a Van Brunt could ever need. The gold lantern flashed in the moonlight. He held it up to the window. 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, he thought, and then it's time for a midnight ride. But it won't be Paul Revere. No, not Paul Revere at all. He found the oyster knife at last. He lay his cupped palm sideways over the vent. Don't get blood on your Armani. And stabbed the blade into his palm. The blood came hot. He dripped it into the lantern, where the skull of the horseman waited to sip it like nectar. The reliquary glowed, and an incantation in Old Dutch appeared, shining from within the metal. It was time. Hedwig bent and whispered into the vents. Rise headless and ride. The letters vanished, and a cold white light burst from the thing. The skull wasn't just a skull anymore. It had gestated. Capillaries clung to it the way fine hair clings to the crown of a newborn. A thick, carotid artery moved with snake-like undulation, drinking blood from the pool at the base, pulling it upwards to circulate through scarlet vessels, through twisting coils, slurping the liquid greedily, the way little Zeph used to slurp strawberry Nesquik through a crazy straw. The blood pulsed and pushed into the nose, into the eyes, into the hollow cavity within the skull. But was it hollow still? Hedwig didn't think so. He felt a mind growing there, something with a will to challenge his own. He fixed his gaze to the twin caverns of its eye sockets, speaking slowly and deliberately. Jessica Bridge. The death's head grin broadened somehow, and a thread of black and green liquid, shiny as a horsefly's wings, trickled from the gap of a missing eye tooth. Only Jessica Bridge. Do you understand? He shook the lantern. Do you understand? The face lurched forward and struck the glass, leaving a red splash there. It wobbled and settled, smiling and nodding. Jessica Bridge, hissed the face. Yes. Hedwig raised the lantern a little. Jessica Bridge. The red face tipped backwards and the jaw cracked wide. Hedwig recoiled. Something pink and wet writhed inside that mouth. The nub of a new tongue, salivating as if it could taste the name. Jessica Bridge. Jessica Bridge. Jessica Bridge. Jessica Bridge.